Hi everybody. I'm just going to read this document that I wrote. I want to read it so that people that don't like to read can hear it. So I'm just going to do this right away, see if I can get it in on a YouTube video. Okay? This is good news. The American Church of Religious Freedom is the name that I have given to the religion of the American people that has existed undefined within the two self-evident truths proclaimed on July 4th, 1776 in the Declaration of American Independence. 234 years ago, this July 4th, our nation was, as Abe Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Out of this famous proposition of equality, authored by Thomas Jefferson, emerged the co-principle of dynamic force and direction that states unequivocally in Jefferson's words that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Ever since that day, the phrase all men are created equal has basically piqued the minds of the great thinkers worldwide as to exactly what Jefferson meant by that. And likewise, probably every one of American citizens have at one time or another thought about, what equality means in our country. Went through the whole civil rights union deal back in the 60s, trying to figure that out. What is equal? And, Americans know that equality is tied in with the unalienable rights, the endowment by God of unalienable rights. But, some Americans are unable to see their freedom under the present form of government. I mean, not the form so much, but the administration, the people that are operating. In this present day, the American people are very much different from the people of 1776. America in those days, Americans, they were all Christians, and belief in God was basically their primary fortitude. This is how they were able to do what they did, is because they had faith in God, and specifically they believed in Jesus Christ. I mean, the 13 colonies were possessions of Great Britain, and all of the people that were British subjects. I mean, ever since Henry VIII was proclaimed the head of the church in England in 1532, they had gone through a whole series of political and religious wars, revolutions, things like that in England. And a lot of it was the turmoil that was created with the Reformation, Lutheran, Calvin, and then Henry VIII and him making his own religion. They actually just really took back control from the Pope. But the net result is that they had gone through all that, and the people that were coming over here were a product of that. And the reason they wanted to come over here is they wanted to practice their religion the way they wanted it, without a whole bunch of stuff going on. And during that period of time, the British were very busy overseas in their own territory, and so America really got to grow up for a while without heavy influence, and this is how they developed their own, basically, self-government. And so the Americans of that day, they all believed in Jesus Christ. That's the bottom line. They just differed as to how they practiced that belief, what their ideas were. Okay? And Jefferson wrote the Declaration of American Independence under those social conditions, and that's very important to understand that when he's writing, the conditions under which he's writing, who's his audience? There's 56 men that signed that Declaration of Independence. Where are their heads at? What are they thinking? Okay? I'll tell you something. Everybody then knew that Jefferson was writing about the God who raised Jesus from the dead, when he used the word created equal. And everybody knew that Jefferson's reference to the Creator, again, who endows us with certain unalienable rights, points to the Bible verse in Genesis 1:27, which says, And God created man to his own image. To the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. So that statement is, they're all Christians. They're just not going to talk about it specifically, because Jefferson and I guess all of them agreed that that was your own business. How you wanted to do your religion was your own business. So they weren't going to ask you, what you want to tell people, fine, but they weren't going to bug you about it. So that's how they didn't mention the name of Jesus in this document. It wasn't necessary. I don't think it's necessary now if you just use your head. They certainly weren't any other religion other than Christian, and they weren't talking about any other God other than the God that raised Jesus from the dead. And, you say, well, you're talking about abstract God and stuff. No, I'm sorry, that's not the case. 56 men representing us here now, and all Americans through all time, at that historical Congress in Philadelphia, signed their names in a unanimous agreement with the Declaration of American Independence authored by Thomas Jefferson. By the agreement of these 56 men, we, all who claim to be Americans, are each and all committed to rest the strength of our nation directly upon belief in the one God who raised Jesus of Nazareth from the dead, and on the belief that this one God endows each individual person with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's pretty simple. That's what everybody was signing. And they're all Christian. So this is kind of, they were so pressured. They didn't know how amazing this thing was, and neither did Jefferson. But I suspect he had an inkling, because he was a very spiritual and religious man. In 1786, he wrote the Virginia Assembly's bill for religious freedom, and that is a very important document in the construction of our Constitution. So he was talking about religious freedom, the freedom that we have, life, liberty, pursuit, happiness. The freedom that comes from unalienable rights is primarily and first and foremost the freedom of religion, because you can classify everything that you're doing as your religion. That's what freedom of religion is. That's what unalienable rights are. They're not defined, but they're not limited. And the only limitation you have as a citizen is if you go and basically break the common law of man, which is you violate someone else's personal space in some way, shape, or form. Either you go and steal from them, or you steal from them in some way, or you cause them some kind of harm, or interfere with their freedom. That's common sense. And Jefferson figured, well, that's all we really need. We just need the truth. We don't need a bunch of stuff. If you look closely, you will see that the two self-evident truths are a direct reflection of the two great commandments that Jesus gave when he was questioned about natural law, and that was in Matthew 22:36 through 40. Just listen to these words, and at the same time think about the two self-evident truths. Okay, just listen. Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, and with thy whole soul, and with thy whole mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And the second is like to this, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. It is perfectly clear to me that Thomas Jefferson was inspired by God to translate the two great commandments of Jesus Christ into the law of freedom upon which this great nation of America rests, which is right there, the two self-evident truths. That's what our nation rests upon. So I'm asking, are we not loving God with our whole heart, mind, and soul when we affirm and claim that God creates each of us equal to himself? If I accept the statement that all men are created equal, if I want that equality, I have to accept the wholeness of it. And the wholeness of it is God is the one that's creating equality here. So by me accepting that completely, I'm loving God with my whole heart, my whole mind, and my whole soul. And are we not loving our neighbor as ourselves when we agree that God endows us equally with certain unalienable rights? I mean, do unto others as would have done unto oneself. Are we not loving, am I not loving my fellow citizens by believing that they are the same as me, that they are literally gods walking about? They're, they're Jesus Christ. This is what we're talking about. I mean, yeah, of course it's a meditation and it's a thought. But how else do you think things happen in this world? They happen through thought and will and focusing ideas and not letting up. That's how things work. If you don't think so, well, then you need to think somewhere the direction because that's the truth. So we are. We're doing the first and second commandments. The first commandment is to love God. Well, we're doing that when we accept the fact that God created us. And the second commandment is to reflecting on that equality of the first principle. Then we realize everyone's getting certain unalienable rights. And endowment really is the best way to look at that is that God is giving you His person. And so now you have His person and all the citizens have His person. So isn't that loving our neighbor as ourselves? Because if I love myself as the person of God and I love my neighbor as the person of God, am I not fulfilling that commandment? Yeah, I am. Thomas Jefferson, he placed us safely in God's care. Yes, he did. Because this revelation has been waiting for all of us for 234 years, right up to this moment. This revelation comes to us now because it is now that it is needed. And Jefferson foresaw this day when government would lose its way. And that's really what's happening in this country right now. The government has lost its way. We Americans of July 4th, 2010 are now confronted in our faith in America because the citizens who are in control of our present government have demonstrated their corruption by overtly and hard-handedly suppressing the freedoms of Americans, by interfering with American farmers' freedom to grow whatever plants they decide to plant, by making unnatural laws against that which our Creator, who has endowed us, has made holy, cannabis for example, by giving aid to enemy regimes like Saddam Hussein, and making American citizens pay for treasonous aid, by making alliances with enemies of freedom, South Korea, Colombia, Taiwan, every country that we're giving money to. They're enemies of freedom. By engaging in unjust wars and causing the death of innocent people, by causing the needless death of American soldiers in wars of aggression against the peace and liberty of the American people, thereby violating the very principles that are set forth in the Declaration of American Independence. The principles of democracy, the principles of liberty, the principles of respect for others, the principle that we're only going to defend ourselves, that we will not attack, and that's a violation right there. A war in Iraq, for example. The regresses for such violations by any government are clearly declared when Jefferson's words blare forth as a command to all patriots. Yeah, this is heavy. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. We have reached the juncture point in the expansion of American liberty where any tyranny over the mind of man needs to be swept aside as destructive of the end purposes of liberty. The end purposes of liberty it requires a free mind. And you can only tell what a mind is like by the expression of the person. So, tyranny of the mind, this is an expression that Jefferson used in his oath. I have sworn on the altar of God eternally hostility against all forms of tyranny over the mind of man. And he's talking about Satan, okay? So he clarified his thinking about this. This is Thomas Jefferson, about these rights that I'm saying, that when the government is acting destructive of our rights, this is when we have to take this government to task. We have to alter it, which is what I recommend, or we have to abolish it. And I'll tell you what I recommend in a couple minutes. But this is what Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1786 in the Virginia Act for Establishing Religious Freedom. The rights hereby asserted are of the natural rights of mankind, and that if any act shall be hereafter passed to repeal the present or to narrow its operation, such act will be an infringement of natural right. So, Jefferson is not only, he's not just talking about a theological viewpoint, he's talking about natural. What is natural? What is the natural deal? The agreement signed by these 56 Americans is the embryonic foundation of the political system upon which our nation is to be constructed. Obviously not constructed right now. These defining conditions of our democracy are spiritual in nature and constitute the spirit of America. Yes, hello folks, the spirit of America. Taking the self-evident truths in a strictly literal sense brings forth the religion of freedom. The Cambridge Dictionary says, religion is the belief in and worship of a god or gods or any such system of belief and worship. The words that define the religion of American Church of Religious Freedom are clearly stated when it was written in the Declaration of Independence, American Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The 56 signers of the Declaration of American Independence clearly and unanimously established belief in and worship of a God. In the two self-evident truths, they certainly did. They established belief in and worship of a God. That's a religion. So when you say, "Oh no," listen, I'm not making this up. This is it here, right here, and I'm reading in the dictionary what the definition of a religion is, and this fits the definition of a religion. So if you want to then twist the dictionary and everything to get out of establishing the fact that our country is based on a relationship with God and an agreement with God, set up by God, if you don't want to accept that, then you're not an American. I don't know what the hell you are, but you're certainly not American. You tell me you don't believe in God, don't tell me. I don't want to hear it. Because by this definition, your rights depend on your belief in God. And if you go around saying, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God, and other Americans are listening and say, well, then he's not an American, because we're believing in God, we're believing that he created us equal, and that our rights come from this authority of God. So if this guy doesn't believe in God, then he doesn't have those rights, technically speaking. Kick him in the ass, tell him to take a hike. Got nothing to say, he's not an American. Oh, I've got my driver's license and my birth certificate. So what? Show it to the President of the United States for He could give a shit. I'm sorry. Is it not belief and worship to recognize and acclaim God as the author of our existence and of our life in His creation, and to recognize and acclaim that this one God endows each one of us with certain unalienable rights, which in fact means a primary right of unrestricted religious freedom? The establishment of this unique American religion as the basis for our democracy is a divine act of God which touches each American individually and offers every American haven and protection against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. That's Thomas Jefferson's quote. Tyranny over the mind of man is recognized in our present-day American political leaders. They enact and support laws that are contrary to the natural law of freedom because they are godless in their thinking. They enact and support laws that are contrary to the natural law of freedom because they are godless in their thinking. I mean, I have to repeat that. Their thinking does not joyfully reflect the goodness and mercy of the one all-loving, merciful God who created us equal to Himself and endowed us with equal unalienable rights, but rather their thinking reflects the twisted and unnatural impulses of self-destruction that are unceasingly projected by Satan upon all men. I'm confident that Thomas Jefferson was thinking of, in the scripture, in the letters, in the epistles, the first letter of Peter, chapter 5, 6 through 9, verse 6 through 9. When he made this oath, the Apostle Peter said this. Here's what he said. So humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time. Cast all your worries upon Him, because He cares for you. Be sober and vigilant. Your opponent, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, steadfast in faith, knowing that your fellow believers throughout the world undergo the same sufferings. So I believe that that statement by the Apostle Peter matches the U.S. model. In God we trust. I mean, that's what he's saying about. That's what he's saying. Steadfast in faith. Steadfast means continuous, trusting. The only way freedom can reign supreme over our land is for each American to trust in the Creator, be confident in the two self-evident truths, at the same time be wise enough to recognize the evil influence that Satan has over the mind of man, and not allow that influence to tyrannize your mind. Thomas Jefferson, he took an oath, and that's where he's coming from. He swears, he says, I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. We free ourselves from this satanic tyranny over the mind of man by joining Thomas Jefferson in his sacred oath. Now those words are etched into the stone around the rotunda at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., so you can see that, you know. And it says right there, very simple, I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Very, very simple. It's obvious to me that Thomas Jefferson recognized that the enemy of freedom was the age-old enemy of humanity, Satan, and that the battleground was in every man's mind. Jefferson knew that freedom was a mental state of peace and goodwill towards all men. Is not the ultimate aim of American democracy that is declared in the Declaration of American Independence to live in peace and harmony without fear by placing our complete trust in God revealed in the two self-evident truths? The God of the self-evident truths judges all men equal to Him and sentences them to eternal freedom and joy. That's what comes from our God. There is no condemnation in the God of America. There is only equality and eternal life in joy. The religion unknowingly established by the founders of our great nation is the mental tool for Americans to use to free their minds from Satan's fearful grasp. By prayerfully contemplating the self-evident truths of holy creation and sacred endowment, Americans can commit to trust in God and make themselves feel the joy of liberty under God. It is the feeling of joy that is undefeatable in a man. Is it not always true that joy is fearless? How can a man feel anything else if he is feeling joy? The courage and strength of America comes through the joy of the American people. I would like to note here that the joy of liberty under God must first exist as a desire visualized in the heart of each American citizen. What I mean is that you must force yourself to feel joyful right now, immediately, knowing that it is not only logical to feel continuously joyful because of your trust in God, but also it is the wise thing to do in order to prevent any form of tyranny over your mind. Your agreement to accept God's endowment requires you to feel joy as a demonstration of your trust in God. You have nothing to worry about if you truly hope and trust in God. That which stops you from feeling joy. That what stops you from feeling joy. Like, you want to feel joyful. Everybody does. So what is it that stops you from feeling joy? What is that called? Jefferson refers as tyranny over the mind of man, which means satanic influence of fear and doubt, and that's it. You're holding these truths, the truths of personal creation and endowment by God, by holding them as self-evident, is the joy that overwhelms all tyranny over your mind. There is no doubt in joy. There's only faith and confidence in joy. Command your mind to be joyful and at all times. And let yourself be a patriot in thought, considering the two self-evident truths as your reason for action, dedicated to honoring the Creator, and dedicated to respecting the unalienable rights of all citizens. My conclusion about this truth of the religion existing in the Declaration of American Independence is that for an American to ethically claim for himself or herself the certain unalienable rights stated as self-evident truth, he or she must consciously recognize and acclaim the divine nature of the Declaration of American Independence, and consciously recognize and acclaim the spiritual relationship that is established between every citizen with God. The spiritual relationship between the individual citizens and all other citizens is expressed as e pluribus unum, which applies here to Americans, would translate as one person out of many persons. I know that many people think that, they interpret that as meaning one nation out of many people, but that's not a well thought out conclusion, because, knowing Thomas Jefferson and where his head was at, that wouldn't make sense. Clearly, the application of the phrase by Thomas Jefferson would refer to one person as the ideal standard of unity out of all persons, namely Jesus Christ. The concept of the mystical body of Christ, in which Christ is the head of the body and all humanity are the members of the body, is a basic tenet of all Christian faith. Applying the concept here in the two self-evident truths reveals that God creates all humans equal to Jesus Christ, with the same rights and authority as Jesus. This reminds me of what Jesus said to the Jews when they got mad about him, saying that he was the Son of God. He says, he answered them, this is a quote right out of Matthew 10:34. Is it not written in your law, I said you are gods? The practical application of e pluribus unum to myself as a citizen is that I think of myself as Jesus, and in that state of mind, I then think of each other citizen as Jesus. I see myself as Jesus because, He's created me equal to Himself, and this is Jesus. So I'm seeing that the common thing that all of us as citizens can have together is we can all agree that Jesus is the ideal citizen. He's the ideal citizen. So that's what we can all agree on. So I'll be Jesus and you'll be Jesus and we'll all be Jesus together, and I'll respect you and you'll respect me as Jesus. I'm being Jesus, respecting you as Jesus. What I'm talking about is basically fulfilling that all men are created equal, and this endowment and respect for the rights of others and so on and so forth. Because if we were all in that attitude, then we'd all get along. And it is not going to just happen. You got to put yourself in there. You got to think about all of this stuff that I'm talking about and make yourself be that way. From such a viewpoint, which is, me, Jesus, you, Jesus, I then act accordingly, exercising my freedom without interfering with the freedom of another citizen. From such a viewpoint, I mind my own business. I'm telling you, man, this is the cornerstone of freedom. You got to learn to mind your own business. And I do not question another citizen's personal beliefs, nor try to impose my beliefs on another citizen. Now, we can talk as citizen, but I'm not going to pry, and I'm not going to draw you out and demand an explanation of what your religion is. It's none of my business. Plus, I'm not going to get in your way. Whatever you're doing, as long as you don't hurt me or steal from me, I'm fine. And obviously hurt anybody else or steal from anybody else. So as long as you just act decent, you're free to do as you please. I don't care what you do, personally. I mind my own business, to do not question another citizen's personal beliefs, nor try to impose my beliefs on another citizen. I am free to speak my mind, and that is the only tool of influence that I value and use in my relationship with other citizens. That's it. I don't have anything but my mouth. I don't have any guns I have no way of forcing anything. So this is cool. This is how it should be. Under such social conditions of an enlightened, free people, the only responsibility of a government is to protect all citizens from theft or harm, or any impedance to their liberty. This condition of freedom does not exist in America today, because the government seeks to invade the personal freedom of Americans under the pretext of protecting them from supposed evils that the government has in fact created out of nowhere. And that's true. Listen, if you're looking for trouble, you'll always find it. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. I used to type that a million times. What does that mean? How, you may ask, may aid my country? I believe the first thing needed is to take off the fearful blinders of national security imposed upon all Americans by the government and corporate controllers of our society, who, available whether by guile or force, manipulate the American people's lives to comply with the needs of production. These controllers use the media to manipulate the mood and perceptions of the American people. They train us to believe that conformity with the system of commerce and profit is the right thing to do, and they condition us to believe that individualism of mind is not normal. Any human activity that interferes with production is pronounced evil and punishable. Morality is dictated by bureaucrats whose minds are tyrannized by satanic urgings of self-destruction. The hearts of these controlling citizens are corrupted into hate of all that is true and good, and their minds construct ideas of death and destruction, seeing that as the way for America to overcome evil. They live among us, pretending politely to be our friends. When they are alone, their minds are steeped in schemes and manipulations tyrannized by Satan. Ask these citizens if they think that God approves the execution of a citizen, and they will say it is so. Which proves they have twisted in their minds the unequivocal truth of every citizen is unalienable right to live, to life. If you accept the religion of freedom which God has endowed you with, then you act as Jesus and you respect the right to life of all Americans with no exceptions. My God is the giver of life and does not take life away. My God creates me eternally equal to him in all things, and he endows me with his own self, which I am. I know that all other humans are the same as I am. I submit to all Americans that you must accept this religion of freedom approved by the founding fathers of America, and you must be wise by making your entire being accept this religion with open arms and a joyful spirit. I mean, this is something that you have to be enthusiastic about when you accept the truth, when you acclaim that this is the truth, when you really see that this is the only way we can have America. This is the only way we can have it. And it's a good way, and it's a happy thing, and you should be happy about it. I know you've been taught to believe in bullshit and to doubt. That's because you've been trained to think that God is bad, that if you're not good with him, he'll punish you. That's an absolute lie. I submit to all Americans that you must accept this religion of freedom approved by the founding fathers of America, and you must be wise by making your entire being accept this religion with open arms and a joyful spirit. By doing this, you become a soldier of freedom, ready to defend this nation against every form of tyranny over the mind of men. The weapon you have as a soldier of freedom is your free speech and your joy. Speak to your fellow citizens about the reality of the religion of freedom proclaimed in the Declaration of American Independence. Join the American Church of Religious Freedom in the solitude of your mind and heart by accepting and acclaiming what the Creator has done. I couldn't think of any other name to call it. The American Church of Religious Freedom. So, it doesn't have to be called that. The fact is, it doesn't need a name. It's just our religion and our God, our way, the American way. That's what it is, the American way, the spirit of America. For those of you who would say, I don't believe in God, by your own words you deny your unalienable rights. Better that you say nothing, or else real Americans will reject you as un-American because you deny the source and power of American democracy, God. Americans! Exclamation. Rethink your lives in accordance with the two self-evident truths. Rescind all laws against individual freedom, including the laws against marijuana. God makes all plants holy, and it is an affront to American natural law to say that any plant is profane in God's eyes. And the reference on that is Acts 10, verse 15. And the angel said to Peter, do not call profane what God has made holy. He said that 3 times. So that's the raison d'etre of the American Church of Religious Freedom.